There's something haunting about a child who disappears and nobody notices. Not for days, not for weeks, but for years. 2 full years where the sun rises and sets, where seasons change, where holidays come and go, where other children blow out birthday candles and open Christmas presents. 2 years where a little girl simply ceases to exist in the eyes of the world, and not a single person outside those walls asks where she is. November 19, 2011. Salisbury, North Carolina. A small house on Miller Chapel Road sits quiet in the evening light. Inside, a 13-year-old girl stands in the corner of a room. Her name is Carolyn Parsons, and she's been standing there for hours. This isn't unusual for Erica. Standing in the corner is one of the punishments she knows well, one of the kinder ones, actually. Her legs ache. Her body sways slightly. She doesn't look good, her adoptive brother Jamie would later say. She looked like a zombie. This is the last time Jamie sees his sister alive. He doesn't know it then, of course. None of them are saying goodbye because nobody thinks this is goodbye. But Erica is disappearing, not in the dramatic way you see in movies, not with police tape and search parties and Amber Alerts. No, Erica is disappearing the way children disappear when nobody's watching, when nobody cares enough to ask questions, when the people meant to protect you are the very ones you need protection from. And here's the thing that makes your stomach turn. After Erica vanishes from that house in November of 2011, life just continues. Her adoptive parents, Casey and Sandy Parsons, they keep cashing her benefit checks. They keep claiming her as a dependent on their taxes. They keep collecting food stamps with her name on them. Month after month, the money keeps flowing in for a child who isn't there anymore, for a child who will never come home, for a child whose small body is already buried in a shallow grave nearly 200 miles away in South Carolina. 2 years pass, 730 days, and in all that time nobody reports Erica missing, not her teachers because she didn't go to school. She was homeschooled, or at least that's what her adoptive parents claimed. Not her doctors because she rarely saw any. Not social workers, even though they'd investigated abuse allegations before and found nothing. Not neighbors because Erica had already been invisible for so long. The world forgot about Erica Parsons before she even died. And when she finally was reported missing in July of 2013, the investigation would uncover something so disturbing, so systematic, so deliberately cruel, that even hardened detectives struggled to comprehend it. This isn't just a story about a missing child. This is a story about torture that happened behind closed doors while the rest of the world went about their day. This is about a little girl with disabilities who needed extra love, extra patience, extra care, and instead received the exact opposite from the very people who promised to protect her. This is the story of Erica Parsons, a child the system failed, a child nobody saved, a child whose life mattered even though the people around her acted like it didn't. February 24, 1998. Mooresville, North Carolina. A baby girl enters the world, tiny and fragile and completely dependent on the adults around her to keep her safe. Her mother, Carolyn Parsons, holds her newborn daughter and already knows the impossible truth. She can't keep her. Carolyn is married to Steve Parsons, but he's not this baby's biological father. The baby's real father is a man named Billy Dean Goodman, someone with serious substance abuse problems, someone who's constantly in trouble with the law. Carolyn already has 3 other children to care for. She's struggling financially, emotionally, in every possible way. She grew up in foster care herself, spent time homeless, and she knows exactly what that life looks like. She doesn't want that for her daughter. So she names the baby Erica Lynn Parsons and makes a decision that she believes is best. She reaches out to family, to Steve's brother Sandy Parsons and his wife Casey. They agree to take the baby, to raise her as their own, to give her the stable home that Carolyn feels she cannot provide. At the time, it seems like a blessing. Family taking care of family. A baby girl getting a chance at a better life. The adoption is finalized in 2000 when Erica is just 2 years old, and for a while Carolyn gets to visit. She sees her daughter occasionally, watches her grow, hopes that she made the right choice. The last time Carolyn sees Erica is January of 2011. By that point, Erica is 12 years old. She doesn't know it, but she'll never see her biological mother again. Within 11 months, Erica will be dead. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about who Erica was, because she deserves to be remembered as more than just a victim, more than just a tragedy. Erica was a child with challenges, yes. She had developmental delays. She had hearing problems that required hearing aids, though her adoptive parents often refused to get them for her or replace them when they broke. She had intellectual disabilities that meant she needed extra help, extra understanding, extra compassion. What Erica needed was a family who would advocate for her, who would make sure she got the speech therapy and medical care and educational support she deserved. What she got instead was Casey Parsons, a woman who couldn't even stand to look at Erica's face. Casey's own sister, Robin Ashley, would later testify that Casey despised Erica because the little girl reminded her of Carolyn, Erica's biological mother. Every time Casey looked at Erica, she saw the other woman, saw the affair, saw everything she wanted to forget. And so Casey decided to make Erica disappear long before she actually killed her. She started by erasing Erica from family life. While the other children in the house got to eat at the table, Erica was fed separately, often given dog food instead of regular meals. While the other children went to school and had friends and got to be kids, Erica was kept hidden away, homeschooled in name only, isolated from anyone who might notice the bruises, the fear, the signs of abuse. In March of 2002, when Erica was just 4 years old, the Department of Social Services actually investigated accusations of abuse in the Parsons home. They looked around. They talked to Casey and Sandy. They found no signs of abuse. Case closed. And with that, any oversight, any outside eyes on what was happening to Erica disappeared. DSS wouldn't check again, and Casey and Sandy now knew they could get away with it. That investigation should have been the moment Erica was saved. Instead, it was the moment her fate was sealed. The word abuse feels too small for what happened to Erica Parsons inside that house on Miller Chapel Road. Abuse is a slap, a shove, a moment of anger that crosses a line. What happened to Erica was torture, systematic and prolonged and deliberately cruel, inflicted on a disabled child who had no way to defend herself and nowhere to run. Let's be clear about what torture means. We're talking about years of suffering. We're talking about isolation, starvation, physical violence so severe that it broke bones, that left scars, that should have killed her long before it finally did. And the truly horrifying part is that Casey didn't do this alone. She had help. She had Sandy, her husband, Erica's adoptive father, participating right alongside her. And she had the other children in the home, Erica's adoptive siblings, who Casey encouraged and sometimes forced to abuse Erica too. Jamie Parsons, Erica's adoptive brother, would later testify in court about what life was like in that house. He described how Casey would make Erica stand in corners for hours, sometimes all day long. How she would beat Erica with her fists, with objects, with whatever was nearby. How she would lock Erica in closets, small dark spaces where the little girl would be trapped for hours, terrified and alone. And when Erica inevitably wet herself or soiled herself because she was locked away with no access to a bathroom, Casey would beat her again for that. But Casey had a specialty, a particular form of torture that she seemed to take pleasure in. She would grab Erica's fingers and bend them backwards until they snapped. Can you imagine the pain of that, the sound of your own bones breaking? And then imagine it happening not once but over and over again throughout your childhood. Multiple fingers broken multiple times. And Casey wouldn't take Erica to a doctor. She couldn't risk anyone seeing the injuries, asking questions. So instead, she would make homemade casts out of popsicle sticks and tape and force Erica to heal on her own. Jamie testified that he was made to break Erica's arm when she was 5 years old. 5. A kindergartner. And Casey forced her own son to be the one to do it. The psychological torture of that, making siblings hurt each other, making them complicit in the abuse, ensuring that even if they wanted to tell, they'd be too scared, too guilty, too traumatized to speak up. The abuse wasn't random. It wasn't just moments of lost temper. This was calculated. Casey beat Erica with belt buckles until the little girl had bald spots on her head where hair wouldn't grow anymore. She would choke Erica, cutting off her air, watching her struggle. She starved the child, keeping her malnourished and underweight while the rest of the family ate normally. And where was Sandy in all of this? Sandy Parsons, the man who agreed to adopt Erica, who promised to be her father to keep her safe. He was participating. According to his own later confession, he admitted to the harsh treatment. He admitted to the belt buckle beatings, to the choking, to locking Erica in closets. He stood by and watched his wife torture a disabled child, and not only did he not stop it, he joined in. Erica's disabilities made her an easy target. She couldn't hear well without hearing aids, and Casey often refused to provide working ones. She had intellectual delays that made it harder for her to understand what was happening, to plan an escape, to advocate for herself. She was isolated from school, from doctors, from anyone who might have helped her. The Parsons claimed they were homeschooling Erica, but there's no evidence of any actual education happening. What they were really doing was keeping her hidden. Child torture cases, and that's absolutely what this was, have certain hallmarks. Research shows that in these cases, the abused child is often treated differently from other children in the home. Erica ate dog food while her siblings ate regular meals. The abuse typically involves multiple adults in the household. Both Casey and Sandy participated. Siblings are often aware of the abuse and may even be coerced into participating. Casey forced the other children to abuse Erica too. And here's something chilling. Women actually figure much more prominently as perpetrators in child torture cases than in other forms of abuse. And often, the mother figure is the dominant abuser. Casey fits that profile perfectly. Multiple people who knew the family said that Casey was the one who couldn't stand Erica, that Sandy was more passive, that Casey was the driving force behind the cruelty. Photographs presented in court later showed Erica standing in corners on 5 separate occasions, documented like they were normal family photos. Can you imagine the mindset of taking pictures of your child being punished, of archiving their suffering like it's something to remember? These weren't photos of birthday parties or holidays or happy moments. These were photos of torture, preserved for posterity. Robin Ashley, Casey's own sister, testified that she had seen the bruises and marks on Erica. The situation got so bad that Robin actually took custody of Erica for several months because Casey straight up told her that if Erica stayed in the house, Casey was going to kill her. Let that sink in. Casey admitted out loud to her own sister that she was afraid she would murder this child, and Robin believed her enough to take Erica away. But here's where the money comes in. Casey took Erica back, not because she missed her, not because she had some change of heart or moment of maternal feeling. She took Erica back because she was afraid of getting caught collecting benefits for a child who wasn't living in her home. Erica's worth to Casey was measured in monthly checks. As long as Erica was physically present, even if she was locked in a closet, even if she was being beaten daily, even if she was barely being fed, Casey could keep collecting money in Erica's name. And she did, month after month, year after year. The abuse escalated. It always does in these cases. What starts as slaps becomes punches. What starts as punishment becomes torture. And by November of 2011, when Jamie saw Erica standing in that corner looking like a zombie, looking not quite there, looking like something essential in her had finally broken, the end was near. We don't know exactly what happened in those final hours or days. The evidence is too degraded, the crime scene too old by the time anyone started looking. But we know this. Sometime around November 19, 2011, 13-year-old Erica Lynn Parsons died. The autopsy would later show homicidal violence of undetermined means, which is medical examiner speak for this child was definitely murdered, but the body is too decomposed to say exactly how. What we do know from that autopsy, what we can say with absolute certainty, is that Erica suffered tremendously before she died. And we know that because her bones tell the story. Here's what's particularly disturbing about the period after Erica's death. Life just went on for Casey and Sandy Parsons. Not only did they not report Erica dead, not only did they not give her a proper burial or tell anyone what happened, they actively worked to keep up the illusion that she was still alive. And they did this for one simple reason: the money. Erica had been worth a certain amount of money to the Parsons family every month. Social Security benefits, food stamps, tax deductions, all of it added up. And Casey and Sandy had no intention of giving that up just because Erica was no longer breathing. So they kept filing paperwork. They kept claiming Erica as a dependent. They kept collecting benefits in her name. In December of 2011, just days or weeks after murdering Erica, Sandy drove her body to South Carolina. Not to a hospital, not to police, but to a property near his mother's land in Chesterfield County, near a place called Pageland on Taylor Chapel Road. He dug a shallow grave and buried a 13-year-old girl like she was garbage. And then he went home. According to later testimony and warrant details, the process was even more horrific than just burial. On December 17, 2011, Erica died. Casey told Sandy to say that Erica had taken her own life, though nobody believed that story when it eventually came out. They poured bleach on her body to mask the smell, then wrapped her in plastic bags and placed her in a storage tote. And then, as if nothing monumental had just happened, as if they hadn't just ended a child's life, they went to a holiday party that same day. The next day, December 18th, Sandy drove to Pageland, South Carolina, and began digging a hole. He took Erica's remains out of the storage container. Casey removed her clothes, and then they buried her in that shallow grave and discarded the tote and her clothing. They went home and continued their lives like nothing had happened. The fraud continued for years. 2012 came and went. The Parsons filed taxes and claimed Erica. 2013 started the same way. And during all this time, if anyone asked where Erica was, Casey and Sandy had a story ready. They said Erica had gone to live with her grandmother, a woman named Irene Goodman, who they claimed was Erica's paternal grandmother in Asheville. There was just one problem with that story. Irene Goodman didn't exist. Erica's actual paternal grandmother, whose name was Chloe and who was never called Nan, had died about 5 years earlier. There was no grandmother in Asheville. There was no woman who picked up Erica. Carolyn Parsons, Erica's biological mother, even said on Facebook that she had no family in Asheville, that the entire story was a lie. But nobody was asking questions yet. Nobody was checking, and the money kept coming. In June of 2012, there's an interesting note in the timeline. A missing persons report was filed for Brooke Parsons, another child in the household. She came home while investigators were there, but think about what that means. Police were in the house in June of 2012 looking for a missing child. Erica had been dead for 7 months at that point, and nobody mentioned Erica. Nobody asked where she was. She was so erased from family life that even when police came looking for one missing child, nobody thought to mention the other one who'd been gone for months. Casey and Sandy even appeared on the Dr. Phil show in August of 2013, after Erica had finally been reported missing by Jamie. They sat on national television and lied. They talked about how worried they were, how they hoped Erica was safe, how they had done everything they could for her. They spun their story about the grandmother, about Erica leaving with these mysterious people, about how they tried to find her. All lies, every single word. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, federal investigators were building a case. Not for murder, not yet, because at that point they didn't even know for certain that Erica was dead. But they could prove the fraud. They could show that Casey and Sandy had been claiming benefits for a child who wasn't in their home, who hadn't been in their home for years. On July 29, 2014, Nearly 3 years after Erica's death, Casey and Sandy Parsons were arrested on federal fraud charges. The indictments were extensive: conspiracy to defraud the government, identity theft, fraud. 43 charges in total for Sandy. Casey had similar charges and had already pleaded guilty by October of that year. The federal prosecutor, Anand Ramaswamy, made it clear what he thought had happened. He told the court that there was no record of Erica during the time her adoptive parents illegally accepted money. And then he said something that should have chilled everyone in that courtroom. The reason is she's no longer alive. This was February of 2015, during the sentencing hearing. The truth was starting to come out. Jamie Parsons testified at that hearing. Robin Ashley testified. They talked about the abuse, about the torture, about how Erica had been treated like she was less than human. The judge, Thomas Schroeder, listened to all of it. And when he sentenced Casey and Sandy on March 27, 2015, he made his thoughts clear. Casey got 10 years for the fraud. Sandy got 8. And Judge Schroeder specifically said he believed Casey was the brains behind what happened. He said Erica endured horrific abuse. He said the fraud charges had distracted from the bigger picture, from the real crime. But at that point, in March of 2015, investigators still didn't have Erica's body. They strongly suspected she was dead. The evidence was mounting. But without remains, without physical proof, a murder case would be nearly impossible to prosecute. The investigation continued. Billboards went up around Charlotte showing Erica's face, asking if anyone had seen her. The FBI got involved. Search warrants were executed on properties connected to the Parsons family. And Sandy and Casey sat in federal prison, serving their fraud sentences, knowing that somewhere in South Carolina, in a shallow grave near a place called Pageland, the evidence that could put them away for life was slowly decomposing in the ground. July 30, 2013, 20 months after Erica's death, Jamie Parsons walks into a police station in Rowan County, North Carolina, and does something that takes tremendous courage. He reports his sister missing. He tells police that Erica hasn't been seen since November of 2011. He tells them his parents killed her and buried her in the backyard. Jamie is 25 years old at this point. He's lived with the knowledge of what happened to Erica, with the guilt of his own forced participation in her abuse, with the fear of his parents for years. He later retracted the statement about them killing her and burying her in the backyard, probably out of fear, probably because he wasn't entirely sure of the details, probably because accusing your own parents of murder is terrifying. But the important thing is that he spoke up. He reported her missing. He set the wheels of justice in motion, even if those wheels would turn slowly, even if it would take years to get to the truth. The police response was immediate. Erica was entered into the system as a missing person. The media picked up the story. A 13-year-old girl who disappeared in 2011 and wasn't reported missing until 2013. That's not normal. That raises questions. Casey and Sandy were brought in for questioning. They told their story about Erica going to live with the grandmother in Asheville, the grandmother who didn't exist. Investigators started pulling threads, and the whole fabricated story unraveled quickly. There was no grandmother. There was no couple who picked up Erica. There was no record of Erica being anywhere at all after November of 2011. On July 31, 2013, just one day after Jamie made the report, Casey and Sandy's 2 youngest children were removed from the home. Social services had finally stepped in, far too late for Erica, but at least the remaining children would be safe. The investigation intensified. Search warrants were executed. The house on Miller Chapel Road was searched. A storage shed on property owned by Sandy's father was searched. Items were recovered, including a videotape, a hammer, teeth, and school records. The media attention was relentless. Vigils were held in Rowan County for Erica. People who had never met her showed up with candles and flowers and signs, demanding justice for a little girl they only knew from news reports. The community was outraged. How does a child disappear for 2 years without anyone noticing? How does the system fail this badly? Carolyn Parsons, Erica's biological mother, was thrust into the spotlight. She gave interviews, posted on Facebook, pleaded for information. She talked about feeling like she was in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She said she had no idea where Erica was, that she loved her daughter and wanted her found safe. And you have to imagine the guilt Carolyn was carrying. She had given her daughter to Casey and Sandy believing they would take care of her. Instead, she had handed Erica to her murderers. Carolyn started pushing for legislative change. She wanted a law named after Erica that would demand more oversight for homeschooling in North Carolina, because that's how Erica had stayed hidden. Homeschooling, when used properly, is a wonderful option for many families. But in cases like this, it becomes a tool of abuse. Children who are homeschooled don't have teachers who see them every day, who notice bruises or weight loss or signs of trauma. They don't have school nurses or counselors or any of the safety nets that exist in traditional education. And when parents are actively trying to hide abuse, homeschooling makes it devastatingly easy. In August of 2013, Casey and Sandy made their appearance on Dr. Phil. They sat on that stage and lied, and the whole nation watched. They looked like concerned parents. They acted like they were cooperating. And all the while, they knew exactly where Erica was. Sandy had put her there himself. September came. Casey and Sandy were evicted from their Salisbury home. They moved to Fayetteville to try to escape the media attention, to try to live some semblance of a normal life. In October, there was a fire at their former home, the house on Miller Chapel Road. The cause was investigated. Emergency services turned over evidence to the FBI. Everything connected to the Parsons family was now under a microscope. But still no body, no Erica. Months turned into years. The fraud case moved forward, leading to their convictions in early 2015. But the murder case sat in a kind of limbo. Everyone involved, the investigators, the prosecutors, the public, they all knew Erica was dead. They all knew Casey and Sandy had killed her. But proving it without remains is extremely difficult. Jamie had to live with all of this. The knowledge that he'd spoken up, but maybe not soon enough. The guilt of his own participation in Erica's abuse, even though Casey had forced him. The loss of his entire family, because once he reported Erica missing, there was no going back to those relationships. And the questions that must have haunted him. Could I have saved her? Should I have called police sooner? Why didn't I do more? Those are unfair questions to ask of someone who was also a victim of that household, who was also abused, who was also scared. But trauma doesn't care about fairness. It asks those questions anyway. In September of 2015, a private tracker dog company called K9 Specialties was hired by local residents who refused to let Erica's case go cold. The community was invested. They wanted answers. They wanted Erica found, and they were willing to pay out of their own pockets to make it happen. And so the case sat, frustratingly stagnant, for years. Casey and Sandy served their federal fraud sentences. Investigators kept working the case, kept searching, kept hopping for a break. And then, in August of 2016, in a federal prison, Sandy Parsons finally decided to talk. August 2016. Sandy Parsons is sitting in a federal prison, serving his 8-year sentence for fraud. He's been behind bars for about a year and a half at this point. His wife Casey is in another facility serving her 10 years. And Sandy starts talking to Rowan County Sheriff's investigator, Chad Moose. We don't know exactly what prompted this confession. Maybe Sandy's conscience finally got to him, though that seems unlikely given what he participated in. Maybe he made a deal, though the records don't clearly indicate that. Rowan County Sheriff Kevin Orton later stated that no plea bargain was arranged and no assurances were given to Parsons for leading investigators to the remains. Maybe Sandy just got tired of carrying the secret. Or maybe, and this seems most probable, he knew the walls were closing in, knew that eventually someone would find Erica's body, and he wanted to control the narrative, get ahead of the story, try to minimize his own culpability. Whatever the reason, Sandy tells investigator Moose that Erica is dead. He admits it. After years of lies, after the grandmother story and the Dr. Phil appearance and all the manufactured concern, he finally says the words, "Erica Parsons is dead. She's been dead for a long time." And then he starts describing what he calls the harsh treatment that Erica received. Harsh treatment. That's the phrase he uses for torture. He talks about the belt-buckle beatings, about choking her, about locking her in closets, about bending her fingers backwards. He's describing child torture, systematic abuse that went on for years, and he calls it harsh treatment like he's describing a strict parenting style rather than actions that killed a child. But the most important thing Sandy tells investigator Moose is where to find the body. He says Erica's body was discarded on December 19, 2011. Discarded, like trash, like something worthless. He says it can be found off Taylor Chapel Road in Pageland, South Carolina in Chesterfield County, near property owned by his mother. The authorities don't waste time. They work with Rowan County District Attorney Brandy Cook to obtain the necessary approvals. On September 20, 2016, a judge issues an order for custody of a federal inmate, allowing an escort team to take custody of Sandy Parsons and bring him from the Butner prison to Pageland so that he could show the location of Erica Parsons' clandestine grave. And on September 27, 2016, Sandy Parsons leads investigators to a field near Pageland. Sheriff J. Brooks of Chesterfield County is there. FBI agents are there. Rowan County investigators are there. Cadaver dogs are brought in. And in a devastatingly short amount of time, just 90 minutes, the dogs alert. They've found something. Investigators start carefully excavating, and there, in a shallow grave, almost 6 years after her death, they find Erica Lynn Parsons. Sheriff Kevin Orton of Rowan County would later say that following the dialogue with Sandy, they had been able to find what they were looking for. Sandy pointed at a part of forest ground, and it was there, buried in that shallow grave, that the remains of Erica Parsons were finally found. That day in South Carolina was tough on all of them, Sheriff Orton said. He saw some pretty tough cops take it pretty rough. The guards who were with Sandy took him into the woods, and within a minute they were coming back out. Sandy was crying when he came back out. The remains are skeletal. The body has been in the ground through 6 South Carolina summers, 6 winters, through rain and heat and the natural process of decomposition. But it's her. DNA testing will later confirm it, but investigators already know. This is Erica. This is the little girl who disappeared in 2011. This is the child who was tortured and murdered and buried like she never mattered. The news breaks quickly. After 5 years of searching, after billboards and vigils and media attention and public outrage, Erica has been found. Not alive, which nobody really expected, but found nonetheless. Her family can finally have answers. The investigation can finally move forward toward murder charges, and Erica can finally be laid to rest properly. Carolyn Parsons' reaction to the news is complicated. She's devastated, of course, that her worst fears have been confirmed, but there's also a sense of relief that comes with knowing. The not knowing, the hopping against hope that maybe Erica was still alive somewhere, that torture is over. Now Carolyn knows. Her daughter is dead. She's been dead since 2011. And Casey and Sandy, the people Carolyn trusted to care for her child, are the ones who killed her. Erica's family visited the site where her remains were found, and many broke down at the scene. The place where Erica had been hidden for so long, treated as disposable, was now a place of mourning and remembrance. The community of Salisbury reacts with a mix of grief and anger. Grief for Erica, for a life cut short, for all the years she should have had. And anger at the system that failed her, at the people who hurt her, at the fact that it took 6 years to get to this point. But finding the body is just the beginning. Now comes the forensic analysis, the autopsy, the detailed examination of what happened to Erica. And what the medical examiners find in those bones is going to paint a horrifying picture of her final years. January 9, 2018. More than a year after Erica's remains were found, the autopsy report is finally released to the public. Medical examiners have spent months carefully analyzing what's left of Erica's body, and what they've found is evidence of systematic, prolonged torture. The North Carolina Office of the Medical Examiner determines that Erica died of homicidal violence of undetermined means. That's medical examiner language for, we know without a doubt that this child was murdered, but the body is too decomposed to determine exactly which injury killed her. It could have been strangulation. It could have been suffocation. It could have been blunt force trauma. After 6 years in the ground, soft tissue is gone. There's no way to check for bruising on internal organs or signs of asphyxiation. But what remains, the bones, those tell their own devastating story. Erica had many fractures in various stages of healing. That phrase, various stages of healing, is critical. It means these injuries didn't all happen at once. Erica was hurt repeatedly, over time, with enough time between incidents for some bones to begin healing before new ones were broken. This is the signature of prolonged, systematic abuse. Erica's skull shows evidence of trauma. Her nose was fractured. Her jaw was broken. These are injuries that come from being hit in the face with significant force, the kind of force that an adult delivers to a child who cannot fight back. 9 of Erica's ribs were broken. 9. And here's what's particularly telling about rib fractures. They're in various stages of healing. That means they didn't all happen at once. Erica was beaten badly enough to break ribs, then beaten again later and again after that. Multiple incidents over time, each one causing new fractures. Multiple vertebrae in her spine were fractured. The spine, the central column of the human body, broken in several places. The force required to break vertebrae, especially in a child, is significant. This speaks to being thrown, being slammed against things, being beaten with objects. Her right upper arm was fractured. This could be from being grabbed roughly, from trying to defend herself, from being hit directly. And again, like with the ribs, there's evidence that this fracture had time to heal somewhat before Erica died, meaning it happened weeks or months before the end. The state of Erica's bones also showed evidence of malnourishment. Erica wasn't just beaten. She was starved. Her growth was stunted. Her body shows the effects of chronic malnutrition during critical developmental years. While her siblings ate regular meals, Erica was given dog food and scraps, and her bones reflect that. Dr. Cynthia Brown of the University of North Carolina School of Medicine reviewed the case and characterized the treatment of Erica using specific terminology: child torture, not abuse, not even severe abuse, but torture. This is a medical professional looking at the evidence and saying this goes beyond the typical definitions of child abuse. This is systematic, prolonged, deliberate infliction of suffering. The report is difficult to read. Even for people who work in law enforcement, who have seen terrible things, the sheer scope of what was done to Erica over years is overwhelming. Every injury tells a story. Every broken bone represents a moment of pain that Erica endured. And she endured so many of those moments. What the autopsy cannot tell us is what the final moments were like. Did Erica know it was coming? Did she have time to be afraid? Did she call out for help that would never come? Did she pray or cry? Or hope that someone would save her at the last second? We don't know, and in some ways that's a mercy. Some details are too painful to imagine. But we can know this from the medical evidence. Erica Parsons lived in pain. Her body was a map of injuries, some old, some newer, all of them inflicted by the people who were supposed to love her. And when she died, it was because of violence, because someone deliberately took her life. The Rowan County Sheriff received the autopsy report on January 9, 2018, and immediately began the process of determining criminal charges. The autopsy gives investigators what they need to move forward with murder charges. Now they don't just have a missing child case. They don't just have suspicions and circumstantial evidence. They have proof of homicide. They have Erica's bones testifying to what was done to her. And they have Casey and Sandy Parsons, already in federal prison, about to face something much worse than fraud charges. February 19, 2018. A grand jury in Rowan County, North Carolina convenes to review the evidence in the death of Erica Parsons. They look at the autopsy results. They hear testimony about the abuse. They review the statements Sandy made about where to find the body. And they return indictments against both Casey Stone Parsons and Sandy Wade Parsons. The charges are serious: first-degree murder, felony child abuse inflicting serious injury, felony concealment of death, and felony obstruction of justice. These are charges that carry significant prison time, and the prosecution announces that they're seeking the death penalty for both defendants. Casey is brought to Rowan County for a court appearance on March 14, 2018. Sandy appears March 15th. They're both still serving their federal fraud sentences, but now they're facing murder charges on top of that. The fraud case, which had seemed so significant at the time, now feels like the appetizer. This is the main event. The prosecution starts building their case. They have the autopsy results showing homicidal violence. They have Sandy's confession about where the body was buried, which implies knowledge and guilt. They have testimony from Jamie Parsons about the years of abuse. They have testimony from Robin Ashley, Casey's own sister, about the things she witnessed. They have photographs of Erica standing in corners. They have financial records showing the fraud. They have a mountain of evidence. But bringing a murder case to trial is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. And there's always a risk. What if the jury doesn't convict? What if some technicality gets the evidence thrown out? What if Casey and Sandy walk free? The prosecution has to weigh these risks carefully. Meanwhile, Casey and Sandy are sitting in jail, looking at the evidence against them, talking to their attorneys and doing the math. They're facing the death penalty. Even if they somehow avoid that, they're looking at spending the rest of their lives in prison. The evidence is overwhelming. Their best move, legally speaking, is probably to negotiate a plea deal. As of February 2019, defense attorneys agreed to separate trials. Casey's case would proceed independently from Sandy's. This gave each defendant the opportunity to negotiate their own deals, to potentially testify against the other if needed, to pursue whatever strategy their attorneys thought was best. And that's exactly what happens. On August 2, 2019, nearly 8 years after Erica's death, Casey Parsons appears in Rowan County Superior Court and pleads guilty. She pleads guilty to first-degree murder. She pleads guilty to felony child abuse inflicting serious bodily injury. She pleads guilty to concealment of death and obstruction of justice. In exchange for her guilty plea, the death penalty is taken off the table. Casey Parsons is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She will never walk free again. She will die behind bars, which feels like justice, even if it feels inadequate given what she did to Erica. The courtroom is packed for the sentencing. Erica's biological family is there. Community members are there. Media fills the available space. Everyone wants to hear what Casey has to say, if she'll show any remorse, any human emotion, any acknowledgement of the enormity of what she's done. Casey offers no explanation, no apology, no tearful confession or plea for forgiveness. She takes the plea deal because it's her best legal option, not because she feels guilty. The district attorney, Brandy Cook, tells reporters that justice has been served. But has it really? Can there ever truly be justice for a child who was tortured for years and then murdered and buried and forgotten? Carolyn Parsons, Erica's biological mother, is at the sentencing. Her reaction is complicated. There's jubilation that Casey is finally being held accountable, that she's going to prison forever. Video from the courthouse shows Carolyn's visible relief and joy that her daughter's killer will never be free. But there's also grief, because this doesn't bring Erica back. This doesn't undo the years of suffering. This doesn't answer the question of why Casey hated an innocent child so much that she was willing to destroy her. Jamie Parsons also has to live with the outcome. His testimony was crucial to the case. He had to stand up in court and talk about what he saw, what he was forced to do, what happened in that house. That takes courage. But it also means reliving the trauma over and over again. Robin Ashley, Casey's sister, has to reconcile the fact that her own sister is a murderer. She tried to save Erica once, taking her in for those few months. But then Erica went back, and Robin couldn't save her the second time. The system has to reconcile its failures. The Department of Social Services investigated abuse allegations in 2002 and found nothing. They didn't check again. Teachers never saw Erica because she was supposedly homeschooled, but there was no oversight, no verification that education was actually happening. Doctors rarely saw her because Casey avoided medical care for Erica, except when absolutely necessary. Every safety net that should have caught Erica failed. Casey's life sentence is final. There's no appeal that's going to change it. She pleaded guilty. She admitted her crimes, and now she gets to live with the consequences, which is more than Erica got. But the case isn't entirely over, because Sandy still hasn't formally pleaded or been convicted. His case is still pending. His trial date is being set, and everyone is watching to see what happens with him. December 17, 2019. 4 months after Casey's guilty plea and sentencing, Sandy Parsons makes his own appearance in court. Like Casey, he's looking at overwhelming evidence. Like Casey, he's been advised by his attorneys that a plea deal is his best option. His trial had been set for April 6, 2020, and his attorney had requested a change of venue. But none of that will be necessary now. But Sandy's situation is slightly different. While prosecutors believed Casey was the primary abuser, the brains behind the operation, as Judge Schroeder had said during the fraud case, Sandy was still a fully willing participant. He helped torture Erica. He buried her body. He lied for years about what happened. He deserves significant prison time. Sandy pleads guilty, but not to first-degree murder like Casey. He pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He also pleads guilty to felony child abuse, felony concealment of death, and obstruction of justice. The distinction between first and second-degree murder is important legally. First degree implies premeditation, planning, deliberate intent to kill. Second degree is still murder, still intentional, but without that element of premeditation. Sandy's sentence reflects the reduced charge. He's sentenced to at least 33 years in prison, to be served after he completes his federal fraud sentence. Given his age, this essentially means he's also going to die in prison. He was in his early 40s when he was first arrested on fraud charges in 2014. Adding 33 years to that, plus his federal sentence, means he'll be an old man before he's even eligible for consideration for release, and that's only if he somehow gets paroled. The courtroom dynamics are similar to Casey's sentencing. Family members are there. The public is there. Everyone wants to see Sandy held accountable. And like Casey, Sandy offers no real explanation, no dramatic confession, no moment of human connection where he acknowledges the terrible thing he did. The question that hangs in the air is, why did Sandy get a lesser charge than Casey? Is it because he cooperated, because he led investigators to the body? Is it because prosecutors believed Casey was more culpable, that she was the driving force? Or is it simply that his attorneys negotiated a better deal? There's an argument to be made that Sandy deserved the same charge as Casey. He participated in the torture. He was there when Erica died. He dismembered and buried her body. He lied about it for years. He collected money off her death. He's not less guilty just because Casey might have been the more dominant personality. But prosecuting cases isn't about what's philosophically fair. It's about what can be proven, what juries will believe, what resources are available. The prosecution got two guilty pleas, two people going to prison essentially for life. From a practical standpoint, that's a win. From a justice standpoint, it still feels inadequate. Nothing done to Casey and Sandy in a courtroom comes close to matching what they did to Erica. They'll live in prison, yes, but they'll have 3 meals a day, which is more than they gave Erica. They'll have beds and bathrooms and medical care. They'll have more basic human rights than Erica ever had under their roof. With both Casey and Sandy convicted, the legal case is essentially closed. There are no more court dates, no more trials, no more waiting for justice. It's done. Casey is in federal prison serving life without parole. Sandy is serving his federal sentence and will then begin his state sentence of at least 33 years. Neither will ever be free again. But while the legal case is closed, the emotional and societal reckoning with what happened to Erica is far from over. Because Erica's case isn't just about two evil people who tortured and killed a child. It's about all the systems that were supposed to protect her and didn't. It's about the gaps and failures that allowed this to happen. And it's about asking the hard question. How many other Ericas are out there right now, hidden behind closed doors, suffering in silence, waiting for someone to notice? Let's talk about all the moments when Erica could have been saved, should have been saved, would have been saved if the systems designed to protect children had worked the way they're supposed to. March 2002. Erica is 4 years old. The Department of Social Services investigates accusations of abuse in the Parsons household. Someone, we don't know who, called in concerns. Maybe it was a neighbor who heard screaming. Maybe it was a family member who saw bruises. Maybe it was someone who noticed that Erica seemed scared around Casey and Sandy. Whoever it was, they did the right thing. They reported it. DSS sent someone out. They talked to Casey and Sandy. They presumably looked around the house, and they found no signs of abuse. Case closed. No further investigation. No follow-up checks. No ongoing monitoring. Erica was left in that house with her abusers, and DSS walked away satisfied that everything was fine. This is the first major failure. Child protection investigations are difficult. Abusive parents are good at hiding evidence. They clean up the house before investigators arrive. They coach children on what to say. They present a calm, reasonable facade. And investigators are often overworked, carrying too many cases without enough time to dig deep into each one. But somewhere in that investigation, red flags should have been noticed. Erica's fear, the family dynamics. Something should have prompted more scrutiny. Instead, that investigation had the opposite effect. It gave Casey and Sandy confidence that they could get away with it. They'd been investigated. Nothing happened. They were untouchable, and the abuse escalated. The second failure is homeschooling oversight, or more accurately, the complete lack of it. Casey and Sandy claimed they were homeschooling Erica. North Carolina allows homeschooling with relatively minimal oversight. Parents have to file a one-time form with the Department of Non-Public Instruction. Students are required to be tested annually, and records kept for attendance, immunizations, and test scores, but there is no regular inspection by state officials. Under North Carolina law, a homeschool can be established with the filing of that single form, and that's essentially it. This created a perfect environment for abuse to flourish undetected. Erica never went to school, so no teachers saw her. Teachers are trained to spot signs of abuse. They see children every day. They notice changes in behavior, unexplained injuries, weight loss, signs of neglect. But Erica never had teachers. She was isolated, kept home, hidden from anyone who might ask questions. Research into child torture cases shows that homeschooling is often a factor, not because homeschooling itself causes abuse, but because abusive parents use it as a tool of isolation. When used responsibly, homeschooling can be wonderful. But it needs oversight. It needs checks and balances. It needs some way to ensure that children are actually being educated and that they're safe. The horrific murder of Erica Parsons, who was homeschooled in North Carolina, is now cited as a case where the law allowed abuse to go undetected. Advocates for reform have called for several measures. Background checks that would bar parents from homeschooling if they have committed crimes that would prevent them from teaching in public school. A flagging system that would bar parents from homeschooling if they or anyone in the household have previously had a founded abuse or neglect report. Risk assessments when parents begin to homeschool after a recent child abuse report. Mandatory reporter contact to ensure homeschooled children are seen by mandatory reporters via academic assessments or medical visits, and medical care requirements that homeschooled children have the same medical visits required of children in public school. Only Pennsylvania and Arkansas currently forbid homeschooling of kids whose parents have been convicted of child abuse and certain other crimes. Some states require none of these proposed measures. No state requires all of them. All but 2 states allow convicted child abusers and other criminals to homeschool their kids. Think about that for a moment. You can be convicted of abusing a child and still be allowed to homeschool children in most states. Carolyn Parsons recognized this after Erica's death. She started pushing for Erica's Law, legislation that would require more oversight for homeschooling in North Carolina. As of this writing, significant reform hasn't happened, which means other children are potentially at risk of the same isolation that enabled Erica's torture. The third failure is medical oversight. Erica had documented disabilities. She needed hearing aids. She needed speech therapy. She needed ongoing medical care for her developmental delays and intellectual challenges. All of these services should have required regular appointments with doctors and therapists, which would have meant regular opportunities for medical professionals to see Erica and potentially spot abuse. But Casey and Sandy avoided medical care for Erica whenever possible. When her hearing aids broke, they didn't replace them. When her fingers were broken, they made homemade casts instead of going to a doctor. When she needed therapy and support for her disabilities, they simply didn't provide it. And somehow, no one noticed. No one followed up to ask why Erica wasn't coming to appointments. No one checked to make sure she was getting the care she was entitled to. The state of North Carolina provides funding for children with disabilities to get necessary medical equipment and services. Erica should have been getting hearing aids through state programs. She should have been getting therapy. But Casey and Sandy either didn't access these services or accessed them and then didn't use them, pocketing the money instead. And there was no mechanism to verify that children receiving these benefits were actually being served. Disabled children who are homeschooled like Erica are often victims of fraud at the hands of their guardians. One forensics student who studied Erica's case proposed laws requiring parents of disabled children in homeschools to provide disability services, requiring homeschooled children to see a mandated reporter like a doctor, and requiring parents to show proof of appointments if they receive funding for disability services. These seem like common sense protections. And yet they don't exist in most places. The fourth failure is the 2-year gap between Erica's death and anyone reporting her missing. This one is harder to pin on a specific system because it's more about community and family and the way abuse isolates victims. But think about it. Erica had a biological mother who loved her. She had extended family. She lived in a neighborhood with houses close enough that surely someone must have seen her at some point. And yet, for 2 years, no one asked where she was. Part of this is because Erica had already been invisible for so long. She didn't go to school, she didn't go to church, she didn't play outside with other kids. The Parsons family kept to themselves, and Erica, even before she died, had been erased from public life. So when she actually disappeared, when she actually died, there was no change visible to the outside world. The invisibility just continued. But 2 years is a long time. Birthdays should have been celebrated. Holidays should have prompted questions. Family gatherings should have included Erica. And when she wasn't there, someone should have asked why. The fact that Casey and Sandy were able to maintain the lie for so long speaks to how thoroughly they had isolated Erica even before her death. The fifth failure is in the adoption and foster care system itself. Erica was adopted through family connections, which on the surface seems ideal. Family taking care of family. But there was minimal oversight after the adoption was finalized. Once Casey and Sandy became Erica's legal parents, the system essentially stepped back and assumed everything would be fine. There were no regular check-ins, no follow-ups, no verification that Erica was thriving in her new home. And when Casey and Sandy started collecting benefits for Erica, adoption assistance, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, there should have been some verification that she was actually in their care. You can't just claim a child as a dependent and collect money without proving that child exists and is in your custody. Except apparently you can, because Casey and Sandy did it for years. Every single one of these failures represents a missed opportunity to save Erica. Every single one is a moment when an adult with authority, with resources, with the power to intervene, could have looked closer, asked harder questions, demanded proof that Erica was okay. And every single time, the system failed her. When we talk about Erica Parsons, it's easy to focus on the legal case, on the convictions, on the systemic failures. But behind all of that are real people, human beings whose lives were forever changed by what happened to that little girl. Carolyn Parsons, Erica's biological mother, carries a burden that most of us can't imagine. She gave her daughter to Casey and Sandy believing she was doing the right thing, believing she was giving Erica a better life than she could provide. Instead, she handed Erica to her killers. The guilt of that, the what-ifs and if-onlys, that's a weight that doesn't get lighter with time. Carolyn has been vocal about the case. She's spoken to media. She's pushed for legislative reform. She's held vigils for Erica. On the 9th anniversary of Erica being reported missing in July of 2022, Carolyn gathered with family members to remember her daughter. Every year she marks the anniversaries. July 30th, the day Jamie reported Erica missing. November 19th, believed to be around the time Erica died. February 24th, Erica's birthday. When Casey pleaded guilty in August of 2019, Carolyn was in the courtroom. Video shows her visible relief, even joy, that her daughter's killer would never be free. But that moment of victory doesn't erase the years of suffering, doesn't bring Erica back, doesn't answer the question of why. Jamie Parsons, Erica's adoptive brother, is another survivor of that household. He was the one who finally reported Erica missing in July of 2013. He was the one who testified about the abuse, who had to stand in court and talk about being forced to break Erica's arm when she was 5, about watching his parents torture his sister for years. That takes courage. But it also means living with the knowledge that he was there, that he participated even though he was forced to, that maybe he could have done something sooner. Jamie was also a victim of that household. Casey and Sandy abused him too, though not to the extent they abused Erica. He was controlled, manipulated, traumatized. And then he was put in the impossible position of either staying silent and being complicit, or speaking up and potentially destroying his entire family. He chose to speak up, and that deserves recognition. But speaking up doesn't erase the trauma. Jamie has to live with what he saw, what he experienced, what he was forced to do. He has to process the fact that his adoptive parents are murderers, that his sister is dead, that his entire childhood was built on abuse and lies. That's not something therapy can fix overnight. That's a lifetime of healing. Robin Ashley, Casey's sister, is another person forever changed by this case. She testified against her own sister in court. She talked about how Casey couldn't stand to look at Erica, how Casey had told her she was afraid she would kill Erica, how Robin had taken Erica in for several months to try to protect her. And then she had to watch as Erica went back to Casey and Sandy's house, back to the abuse, ultimately to her death. Robin must live with the question, should I have done more? Should I have refused to give Erica back? Should I have gone to police, to social services, to anyone who would listen? She tried to help. She did more than most people would, but it wasn't enough to save Erica, and that's a grief that doesn't have an expiration date. The siblings who survived, who were removed from the Parsons home in July of 2013, they're victims too. They witnessed the abuse. They lived in that environment. Some of them were forced to participate in hurting Erica. They have to carry the knowledge of what happened, the trauma of what they saw, the complicated feelings of being related to people who did such terrible things. And then there's the community of Salisbury, North Carolina. The neighbors who maybe heard something but didn't call it in. The people who saw the Parsons family at the store or around town and noticed that Erica wasn't with them anymore but didn't ask questions. The community members who, in hindsight, realized there were signs and they missed them. After Erica's remains were found in September of 2016, the community came together in grief and anger. They held vigils. They created memorials. They demanded justice. And when Casey and Sandy were convicted, there was a collective sense of relief that at least legally, the case was closed. But closure is complicated. Yes, Casey and Sandy are in prison. Yes, they'll never be free again. But Erica is still dead. She's still been gone since 2011, and no amount of prison time for her killers changes that. The people who worked on the case, the investigators and prosecutors and forensic specialists, they're affected too. Sheriff Kevin Orton talked about how tough it was the day they found Erica's remains, how he saw pretty tough cops take it pretty rough. These are professionals who deal with difficult cases regularly, and even they were shaken by what happened to Erica. This is the ripple effect of child abuse. It's not just the immediate victim, though they suffer the most. It's everyone connected to that child, family members, friends, community members, professionals, everyone who could have helped but didn't, everyone who tried to help but failed, everyone who has to live with the knowledge of what happened. July 18, 2017, 6 years after her death, 9 months after her remains were found, Erica Lynn Parsons is finally laid to rest. The funeral is held on what would have been near Erica's 19th birthday. She was born February 24, 1998. She died sometime around November 19, 2011, at just 13 years old. She should have been in college or working her first job or figuring out who she wanted to be as an adult. Instead, she's being buried, finally receiving the dignity and death that she was denied in life. The service is a chance for the community to come together, to mourn Erica, to remember her as more than just a victim, more than just a tragic news story. It's a chance to acknowledge that she was a real person, a child who deserved love and safety and the opportunity to grow up. Family members are there, including Carolyn, Erica's biological mother. The grief in that room must be overwhelming. 6 years of not knowing where Erica was, of hopping against hope that maybe she was still alive somewhere. And now the finality of a funeral, of a casket, of saying goodbye forever. In February of 2017, just months before the funeral, a memorial event was held in memory of Erica Parsons. The community wanted to honor her, to make sure she wasn't forgotten, to show that even though her adoptive parents treated her as disposable, the rest of the world recognized her value. At the memorial and funeral, there were memory boxes created with Erica's hand and footprints. These physical reminders of her existence, proof that she was real, that she mattered, that she lived. It's heartbreaking that these keepsakes are necessary, that Erica's life was so hidden that physical proof of her existence feels important. But for the people who loved her, for the people who fought for justice for her, these mementos are precious. Erica is buried with dignity, with ceremony, with love. It's the opposite of how Sandy buried her in December of 2011, in that shallow grave in South Carolina, hidden and forgotten. Now she has a proper resting place. Now there's somewhere for people to visit, to leave flowers, to remember her. Her grave marker likely includes her name, Erica Lynn Parsons, and her dates, February 24, 1998 to approximately November 19, 2011. 13 years. That's all she got. 13 years of life, and most of them were filled with suffering. But the funeral is also a statement. It's the community saying, "We failed you while you were alive, but we won't forget you in death." It's the family saying, "We loved you even if the people who were supposed to love you most didn't." It's everyone saying, "You mattered, Erica. Your life mattered." In December of 2022, Erica Parsons' portrait was formally presented to Prevent Child Abuse Rowan. This organization, which works to protect children and prevent abuse, now has Erica's image as a reminder of why their work is so important, why vigilance matters, why we can't assume that children are safe just because we can't see the abuse. Erica has become a symbol, though she never wanted to be. She's a symbol of systemic failure, of the gaps in child protection, of the children who slip through the cracks. But she's also a symbol of resilience, of the community's commitment to doing better, of the push for legislative reform that might protect future children. Every year on the anniversaries of her disappearance and death, people remember Erica. They post on social media, they hold vigils, they light candles, they say her name. In December of 2024, on the 13th anniversary of her passing, people gathered to remember her. 13 years gone and she's still not forgotten. That's the legacy Erica left behind, not by choice, but by circumstance. Her death became a call to action. Her story became a warning. Her name became a rallying cry for change. February 24, 1998 to November 19, 2011. 13 years, 8 months, and 25 days. That's how long Erica Lynn Parsons lived. And for most of that time, she suffered. She was beaten, starved, isolated, tortured by the very people who promised to protect her. Her bones tell the story of repeated fractures, of malnourishment, of violence so severe that medical examiners used the term child torture. But Erica was more than her suffering. She was a real person, a little girl with disabilities who needed extra support and instead got cruelty. She deserved hearing aids and speech therapy and educational support. She deserved love and patience and kindness. She deserved to grow up, to discover her interests, to have friends, to experience joy. Instead, she got Casey and Sandy Parsons. She got a woman who hated her for existing, who saw her as a reminder of an affair, who took out years of resentment on a defenseless child. She got a man who was complicit, who participated in the abuse, who ultimately buried her in a shallow grave and lied about it for years. The question that haunts everyone who learns about this case is, why? Why does someone torture a child? Why does someone kill a 13-year-old girl who never had a chance to fight back? Why does someone continue to abuse and neglect and hurt a vulnerable person over years and years? There are no satisfying answers. Casey never gave a real explanation. She pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, not because she felt remorse. Sandy confessed to where the body was, but he called it harsh treatment, minimizing the horror of what they did. Neither of them has shown genuine remorse, genuine understanding of the enormity of what they took from Erica. Some people are just evil. That's an uncomfortable truth, but sometimes it's the only explanation that makes sense. Casey and Sandy Parsons tortured and killed a disabled child, lied about it, collected money in her name, and showed no real remorse. That's evil. There's no other word for it. But Erica's case is also about systemic failure, about a Department of Social Services investigation in 2002 that found nothing wrong, about homeschooling laws that allowed Erica to be completely isolated from mandatory reporters, about disability services that weren't verified, about medical care that wasn't required, about a 2-year gap where nobody noticed a child was missing. Every single one of those failures contributed to Erica's death, not as directly as Casey and Sandy, who are the ones responsible, but as enablers, as gaps in the safety net that should have caught her. And that's the part that should terrify all of us. Because if it happened to Erica, it's happening to other children right now. Children who are homeschooled without oversight. Children with disabilities who aren't getting required services. Children who are being abused behind closed doors while the rest of the world goes about its day, assuming someone else is watching, assuming the system works. The reforms that advocates have called for, background checks for homeschooling parents, mandatory reporter contact, verification of disability services, risk assessments for families with abuse histories, these aren't radical ideas. They're common-sense protections that balance parental rights with children's safety. But they face resistance from homeschooling lobbies who view any oversight as government overreach. Erica didn't have a voice when she was alive. Casey and Sandy made sure of that, isolating her, keeping her hidden, silencing her. But in death, her story has become a voice for other vulnerable children. Her case is cited by reformers pushing for stronger oversight. Her name is invoked when discussing the gaps in child protection. Her portrait hangs in child abuse prevention organizations as a reminder of what happens when systems fail. Carolyn Parsons continues to hold vigils for her daughter, continues to speak out, continues to push for the changes that might have saved Erica. She's turned her grief into action, which is one of the most powerful things a person can do. The community of Salisbury continues to remember Erica on the anniversaries of her disappearance, her death, her birthday. They refuse to let her be forgotten, refuse to let her become just another statistic, just another news story that fades from memory. In December of 2024, 13 years after Erica's death, people were still gathering to remember her. That's testament to the impact her story has had, to the determination of the people who loved her to keep her memory alive. Erica Parsons deserved better. She deserved a family that loved her. She deserved a system that protected her. She deserved to grow up, to have a life, to matter to the people around her. She got none of that while she was alive. But in death, she's made an impact. Her story has changed conversations about child protection, about homeschooling oversight, about disability services, about how we as a society ensure that vulnerable children are safe. That's not enough. It will never be enough. Erica is still dead. Those 13 years were still filled with suffering. Casey and Sandy Parsons still got away with it for far too long. The system still failed catastrophically. But at least now people know Erica's name. People know her story. And maybe, just maybe, that knowledge will save another child from the same fate. That's Erica's legacy. Not the one she chose, but the one that emerged from the tragedy of her death. A call to action. A warning. A reminder that children are vulnerable, that systems are imperfect, that we all have a responsibility to watch, to question, to speak up when something doesn't seem right. Rest in peace, Erica Lynn Parsons. February 24, 1998 to November 19, 2011. You mattered, you matter still, and you won't be forgotten.